Chapter 17, The Baptism and Power Armor. Thank you all for the positive reviews. A future arc will definitely see Romonus visiting the Chinese pantheon to learn under the most hated people around. Cultivators. Specifically alchemy masters. And maybe see a jade beauty or two. Latia turned to the shocked guard and waved him off. You can leave. The armored guard gave her a deep bow and began to leave. Of course. Romonus waved the guard off as he entered Latia's workshop. It was massive, much bigger than was expected, and all manner of items were spread all around. On the walls, she had many weapons she had created, many of sci-fi. He didn't recognize most of them for a while. Latia watched as Romonus looked around at the many items she had on display with a wondrous expression. Seeing him take an interest in her hobbies made her happy. Does anything catch your eye? He stopped walking in shock and childlike wonder as he rushed to a display. He put his hands on the magical glass as he saw something that he loved in his past life, and this one. He did not expect to see it here in any shape or form, but he did. Is that a Warhammer 40k power sword? Looks Black Templars if I have to say so. Image here. Latia's face began to perk up that someone knew of her favorite fictional universes. Not an anime, but truly fun verse. Yes, I modeled it after those swords. Is that weird? He cleared his voice as he looked a little embarrassed at this. Not weirder than this. He turned around and from his back released his two large wings. Seeing his wings, Latia had many questions because they did not look like the usual of their race, and second, because of the runic tattoos. She rushed over and began to run her hands down the glowing symbols on his wings. Really? You put cornite tattoos on your wings? Why? He chuckled with a sheepish grin. Because they are cool and I can remove them if needed, but they give my wings a few extra protections. Latia had to agree that they did look cool. If you ever get the chance, can you do the same for my wings? He nodded with a smile. Of course, my hobby helped me in this as I made magical tattooing to place these runic tattoos. They increase the strength of my wings, defend them from magic, projectiles, and they increase the flow of demonic energy through them. Latia pulled out a scanner from the spatial storage device she had on her neck. She began to run it up and down his wings a few times as she wanted to see what effects they had. When she looked at the device, she noticed that compared to regular devils, his wings were humming with 250% more energy than was expected. Because their race could not fly on the muscle of their wings alone, as they used pure magic to fly. Romonus, on the other hand, could rely on the pure strength of his wings. His wings compared to a regular devil were massive, muscular, and demonic even. Very odd, but maybe he underwent a mutation or the like to cause his unique wings. Okay, I have so many questions as to why your wings look like this, but this idea of placing runic tattoos on them is smart. I wonder why no one else thought of it. He retracted his wings as he had a theory. Tradition. You and I seem to not be held back by the traditions of our race. This gives me an idea which I will need your help on. She raised an eyebrow. My help? He pulled out a set of schematics he had made a year ago. It was a theory he had based on a fantasy novel in his past life he read. Yes. First, I want to ask you a question. What is demonic power, or as I call it, energy? She answered with ease. Mana warped by Lucifer and Lilith to suit our race? Exactly. When a devil like us absorbs mana from the atmosphere, it is converted into demonic energy. This is where the device I wanted to build would come to mind. Mana, when it is compressed or in high enough concentrations, will become fluid. She knew that much. Yes, it is used in human enchantments or formations. Even here at the clan, use it to fuel our massive defensive formations, but you know better than to touch it. In its pure state, mana becomes destructive. Exactly, I need that destruction. Here. He passed off the schematics over to her as she read through them. At first, it seemed like something that needed alchemy and spellcraft only. But then she saw why it would need tech as well. Still, this was a monstrous idea that only a madman would undergo. Romonus, this baptism, as you call it, could kill you. Pure condensed liquid mana will tear the body apart. Even a devil like you will be torn apart by the power. He nodded with grim determination. Yes, which is why I plan to add a constant array of healing devices. I plan to use the high concentration of mana and the constant damage and healing to push my body and hopefully bloodline to a new level. A tempering of the body if the Chinese cultivators are to be believed. And, if my theory is to be believed, Lucifer and D both place limitations on our race. Surzex and Ajuka are what I believe happens when our race gets past those limitations. That is not enough for me. I want to go past both of them. For that, I need your help. She walked off as she began to look through them, as it did look to be possible. The body grew under stress and constantly destroyed the body, only to heal it back with these potions and healing arrays would in theory grant a much stronger body. Plus, this would affect not just the outside, but every part of the body. As she read through the schematics he had planned, she agreed. Fine, I will do it, but you have to prove to me you can even survive something like this. I'd rather not become a widow before we are wed. He smiled as he was truly thankful. He walked toward her and gently held her hands. Hey, if it works, you can use it too. She recoiled in horror. "I rather not." He let go of her hands and shrugged. "Your loss." She handed him the schematics, which he placed back in his spatial ring. Once that idea was out, he pointed at the power sword. "Does it work as intended?" "Of course. Thanks to my uncle teaching me, I can make something like this with ease." She walked over to the glass case, and with a wave of her demonic energy opened it up. She tossed the large sword to Romonus, who caught it with one hand. He channeled his demonic energy into the blade and watched as the shimmering power field hummed to life around it. "Did you forge this blade?" "Because it is well made." "Yes, it is just part of my hobby, as I sometimes need to make my own to make some sci-fi weapons when I get the inspiration." He turned off the power field as he pulled something from his spatial ring. It was his old sword, which he had made to resist the power of destruction. He no longer needed it because of Blood Drinker and its immunity to destruction. Still, he still considered himself a good blacksmith. "I also used to forge my weapons and armor. This suit I am wearing is just made of my demonic energy, but I do have a suit I tailored out of beast leather. This actually gives me an idea. If the two of us work together, we could in theory make weapons and/or artifacts to rival sacred gears." Latia was not that confident in herself. She looked at the power sword in his hand, not convinced. "You think so?" He nodded. "I do. Just because people in the past created powerful weapons that everyone wants doesn't mean we can't either. Look at this." From his spatial ring, he pulled out one of his original swords. It was smaller than Blood Drinker a little, but the size didn't matter. This was made out of the cheapest, most common magical metal, magisteel. I could have bought more fancy metals, but these were practice swords, really. Here. When he passed her the sword, she almost dropped it because of the sheer weight. He had made it out of a big chunk of metal he compressed down with pure gravity. It allowed him to pack more metal into his smaller body to increase the durability. It did make it rigid, but because it was magical metal, he could reinforce it with demonic energy and power of destruction. "This is heavy." She was forced to place it down as she was not very physically strong. She ran her hand down the metal and began to use her methods to analyze it. "This is weird. It doesn't seem like magisteel anymore. How did you make it?" He sat down as he explained the process. "I will show you. Just don't freak out." From his spatial ring, he pulled out a large see-through barrel. The barrel was 6 feet tall, and inside was a bunch of his blood. Floating in the blood was a massive chunk of magisteel. Magisteel, as it was named, was just metal that had been saturated in thick mana for centuries. The barrel had been enchanted with the time formation to allow the metal to soak up his blood's properties. "Thanks to my alchemy, I have created a potion that allows me to recover my blood faster. This is the only way I could create a metal resistant to the power of destruction. Once it is ready, I will compress it with gravity magic, as I have several more chunks of metal aging like this. Once I have enough, I then begin forging it in demonic energy-fueled flames and temper it in power of destruction. That is how I created my swords." She walked over and looked into the vessel, not disgusted or anything. "How fast is the time in there?" 50 times faster than out here. I had to commission that from the Ajira's clan, because while I am skilled at magic, time magic is still a tricky subject. I can teach you. Thanks to my mixed heritage, I have both Astaroth and Ajira's clan traits, like you have the Gremory and Bale traits. I will appreciate that, but first let's see this power armor." She snapped out of her daydream as she walked him over to the massive suit of metal. She began to explain what she made it out of and why. "To be frank, I also made this out of magisteel because of how cheap it is. I can buy tons of the stuff to use and no one will bat an eye. If I did the same with mithril, adamantium, orichalc *M, cold iron, deep steel, dark steel, or even meteoric, or the price would exceed what my clan would be willing to pay. Assholes." She let the last bit slip as they refused to allow her to buy those more expensive metals in bulk. Was a ton of orichalc *M so bad? It really was, as it was even prized by gods with how rare it was. As for adamantium, it was mined and forged by the Norse dwarves. They sold it, but at sky-high rates. He patted her back as he had the same issue. "Can you believe my parents refused to allow me to buy 500 pounds of mithril? I wanted to forge an armor set from it, but they said that I didn't need it. It's not fair. I could have made a legendary suit by this time if I had that." She smiled that someone understood the struggle. "You know what? Let's tell our uncle and brother. If we say we need them for our research, we can totally make some new items. I can help you make your suit with some tech, and you can help me improve my power armor." He nodded with a child-look smile. "Agreed. Since we got the time, let's bring in Sikvera. With her help, we might even make a titan." Latia began to giggle at the sheer joy she would have if she could make even a single warhound titan. "We have to. Even a single one would make me happy for life. For now, want to try on the suit?" He nodded as she pressed on the chest plate, causing the entire thing to shrink down into a handheld device. "Just place it on your chest and hold still." He did as instructed and put it over his suit. Much like liquid metal, the entire suit began to grow over his entire body. Once it was on, his senses linked up to the suit systems, allowing him to see even if his head was not in the helmet. He raised a hand and clenched his hand. He pointed at Latia and gave the exaggerated line. Falzino's SC*. She raised her hands in faked fear. Oh no, the Emperor's angels of death are here. Anyways, what do you think? He began to move in the suit and found that it was a well-crafted suit. It did not snag on his clothes or skin, and it did not feel heavy. I like it. How long has you been working on this? Not long. It's not the first I made, just the best I made. I plan to show my uncle to ask his permission to let me buy some rarer metals to make my own suit. I will need them as well. Seems we will need the help of my brother and your uncle. Latia and him were sick of cheap magisteel as they wanted stronger and rarer metals. They would need them anyway if they wanted to match the stronger weapons in the world. He didn't know what Blood Drinker was made of, but maybe with Vespera's help he could add some rarer metals. If that happened, maybe his demon sword would grow even stronger than it already was. He would have to speak with her on the matter, though. Chapter 18. Miria's Number and Evil Pieces. Romonus spent the next hours with Latia as they shared their experience working on their creations. He even showed her his blood resurgence potions which he made because of how often he needed blood. She took a few off his hands, but in exchange she let him keep the Black Templar power sword she made. According to her, while it could be used in battle, the blade would not hold up against the kind of stress he could output. Instead, she wanted to work with him directly with much higher quality material to create a better sword and armor for him. It was a good idea, and Romonus certainly wanted to craft a set of armor he could in theory link to his soul like a sacred gear. If Azazel could create artificial sacred gears, he wanted to do the same, as he much rather rely on something he made with his bare hands, instead of borrowing power from God. Still, he can spend hours talking with Latia, but after spending over 8 hours with her, it was time for him to head home. He still had more self-training as it was only 4 p.m. Romonus removed the power armor which he hadn't removed and handed it back to her. Here, I think it is time I head home. She seemed a little disappointed, but they had spent the better part of the day together. So soon? I was enjoying your company, but I understand. He smiled and held her hands again. They were so soft despite her using her hands in her crafting. I agree. We have known each other a few days, but I have loved every interaction. She gripped his hands back and returned the gesture. I agree. We should do this more often. She let go of his hands as he opened a magic circle under him to teleport home. Once he was in his room, he walked over to his bed before falling on it. He began to smile that his fiancée was such a wonderful girl. She was better in every way than the flings he had in his past life. Her hobby in a way was both a hobby and a power of its own. Imagining the day they would build a Psi Titan or something of the like got him excited. There was so much to do in this wonderful world when you were powerful. He sat up and looked over at Blood Drinker. He reached out for the sword and placed it on his lap. He reached out to Vespera, who answered him as usual. What is it? I wanted to ask if you have any idea what your sword is made of? Iron drawn out from the bodies of thousands of humans, angels, fallen angels, and devils. Really? No. He rolled his eyes. Lame. Vespera snorted. It is made of mostly adamantium, with trace amounts of auricalc *. If my memories are to be believed. Why? I wanted to ask if you could absorb more magical metals. I'm not sure. Try it if you want. His face became a bit softer as he gazed at the sword. I rather not cause you pain. She stayed silent for a while before answering. I am always in pain. You have just made it hurt less. Just know, I appreciate what you do. When the link was cut, he reached into his spatial ring and pulled out one of his barrels of blood. He opened it up and turned off the time enchantment. With a wave of his hand, the large chunk of magisteel was pulled out and returned to his ring for later use. He dropped Blood Drinker into the blood as it was the only thing that could ease her pain. When not in use, he could afford to let her rest in a vat of blood, but he would soon have to find enemies to slaughter for her. Maybe even humans from prisons who deserved death. Regardless, in a month he would get his evil pieces, allowing him to reincarnate others into his peerage. Until then, he had time, so he pulled out the soul Gremory his teacher gave him. It was back to self-study and self-improvement as usual. Romonus rarely stopped training for a long as while he could rely on his mere bloodline for everything and still reach the ultimate rank, going past it would be impossible. It was why he was so incredibly strong. Without question the strongest devil of his generation because he was a training madman. The next 7 years were the most important years of his life as puberty was a magical thing. His growth would rise exponentially as long as he pushed himself accordingly. Over the following month, he continued his physical training under Surtur, who pushed him even harder now. Surtur also trained him in the art of two-key control as his use of it was still new. Suji increased the intensity of his sword spars, and McGregor began to teach him darker and more advanced forms of magic. He also had to train in his abilities of power of destruction, gravity, and his alchemy hobby. He was being pulled in so many directions, but instead of buckling under the pressure, he grew under it. Thanks to the Grimoire on Souls, he was beginning to reach closer and closer to unlocking his soulscape. Thankfully, he didn't just train as he would spend time with his family and the ladies in his life. He would often hang out with Latia in her workshop and even on a few dates. He didn't forget to keep in contact with Rahvdall and ended up watching her favorite anime with her once. It was pretty good actually, and he even made sure to visit Miria, his favorite guard. She was less mad at him now, but she was still pissed that he made fun of her. Speaking of Miria, today was the day he was getting his evil pieces from Ajuka, so here he was. Before going to Ajuka's castle to get his pieces, he stopped by at Rahvdall's. Outside, Miria was still leaning against her giant great sword, but when she saw him, her face recoiled in irritation. The blonde guard was still there, but she avoided looking anywhere but forward. Romonus walked toward the purple-haired beauty who gripped the handle of her sword tighter. When he arrived in front of her, her purple eyes were squinted in both vexation and anger. "What do you want?" Romonus cleared his voice before he looked her in the eyes. "I'm sorry." She looked away with a pout on her face. "For?" He smiled internally that she didn't hate him. "For making a joke at your expense." She looked at him and asked him the truth. "Did you mean it?" "No. You're too young to be worried about something like that." Her face turned bright red, so she avoided looking him in the eye. "In that case, I guess I can forgive you if you do one thing for me." He raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Your phone number." He smiled as she handed him her phone so he could put his phone number. When he did so, he handed her phone back. She seemed quite happy, so he didn't try to ruin the moment. "You are gorgeous when you smile, you know." Miria let go of her sword and held her face with a rather adorable expression, if he had to say so. "Really? I don't look old." He shook his head. "No, of course you don't. Who told you that? Every time I tried to get a boyfriend, they all said I was too old." "Am I old?" Romonus thought about it as she was 875, which meant she saw the end of the Great War and fought in the Civil War. Plus, as a powerful ultimate-class devil, her age was not all that great. She still had an impressive level of power, but he did wonder why she worked as a guard. "No, not at all. If it makes you feel better, I like that maturity. Some might say dash." She covered his mouth with her hands. "Don't say it." He smiled and did not call her a MILF despite what he wanted to. "All right, call me all right. Are you free today?" "Oh, no. Tomorrow is my day off." He smiled as he leaned forward. "In that case, want to go on a date with me?" Miria held her face in embarrassment, but she did seem happy about it. "Okay. If you want to go with this old lady, I guess I can go." He snorted and gently cooped her face. "Don't call yourself old. Age is just a number for our kind." He let go of her face and teleported away toward Ajuka's castle. Miria placed her hands over her chest, feeling her heartbeat. The last time she had gone on a date had been 75 years ago, and the guy called things off because he thought she was unfeminine. She then proceeded to throw him through 5 walls, breaking every bone in his body, but he survived. What a little brat. Wonder what he will look like in 4 years. As for Romonus, he teleported in front of Ajuka's castle, which was located south of the city. Unlike Rahvdall's castle, which only had 2 guards stationed outside, Ajuka's castle had none. At least stationed outside, because Ajuka was an inventor, so he relied on his inventions for his security. Outside, 2 giant golems of metal turned to gaze at Romonus. One of them aimed a giant naginata at him before speaking in a distorted robotic voice. "State your identity." "I am Romonus Gremory, and I am here to receive my evil pieces." Both golems scanned him a few times before they moved aside. "Identity confirmed. Enter." Both golems together pushed open the giant enchanted doors behind them and allowed him to walk in. When he walked in, he saw a woman sitting at a desk. He walked toward her and saw she had the green hair of the Astaroth clan. She smiled professionally when she saw him. "Lord Gremory?" "Romonus is fine, but yes." She looked into her computer file before nodding. "Okay, Lord Beelzebub is waiting. Just stand in the teleport circle here." He stepped into the teleport circle that was near the desk. When he did so, she explained how this worked. Evil pieces were created by Lord Beelzebub, but they are not kept here in Lilith. He keeps the monoliths in a separate space no one knows the exact location to. That way they are safe from sabotage. "Are you ready?" "Yes." She pressed a key on her keyboard, causing the circle to surge with mana. In a flash of light, Romonus was teleported away to the side of the Evil Piece King monoliths. It was here where every high-class and noble devil received their pieces. When he arrived, Ajuka was already waiting for him. The Devil King gave a rare smile to his nephew-in-law. "Romonus, I have heard only good things from Latia about you. She seems to be falling for you quite fast, may I add. Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." "Yes, uncle. It is also wonderful to see you. On another note, I am sorry for your loss." Ajuka sighed. "Thank you. I was not close to Diodora and never spoke to him personally, but his death was so odd. Turns out he was not as kind as we believed. His peerage were all abused and terrified of him, though they couldn't tell us what happened when he died." Romonus pushed for information, wondering what Ajuka knew. "What have you found out, if you don't mind me asking?" Ajuka then dropped a bombshell which worried Romonus. "I know what killed him. I just kept it to myself. The Harvester did it. Please tell me the Reaper guy is okay." "You mean the greater spirit of death of the Spirit realm?" Ajuka nodded. Yes. He was summoned here to do the dead. Who knows who Diodora offended so much that they summoned that thing? Your teacher spoke of him. Yes. McGregor said the Rahvdall has never been contracted, and I planned on trying. If you succeed, ask him why he did it. I tried to summon him myself, and he refused my summons. Regardless, we aren't here to talk about that. You're here for your evil pieces. Romonus saw that there were 5 total monoliths. Why are there 5? Each one has different levels, as not every devil is equal. Evil pieces are formed of both the user's demonic power and crystals from the Agrias Island. Very few devils reach the ultimate class or further, so most use the first 2, or maybe the 3rd. The 4th is for the more exceptional ones, while the 5th is for the elites. You can use the 5th one. The 5th monolith was larger than the rest and made of higher quality crystals. He walked toward the monolith, and when he was in front of it, he turned to Ajuka. Do I just channel my energy into it? Ajuka nodded. That one will take a lot, so be careful. No problem. Romonus placed a hand on the crystal monolith before he began to surge power into it. In moments, the monolith began to glow brighter and brighter as Romonus kept feeding it his demonic energy. His reserves were massive, and the sheer purity of his energy was causing even Ajuka surprise. His energy was almost as pure as Surzek's despite him not being a super devil. Will he take the leap as well? Romonus did not stop feeding the monolith his energy until he was running on empty. He had overfed the monolith, which was a hard feat to achieve, but it was worth it. The monolith gathered all the demonic energy he sent into it and began to form his 15 pieces. Thanks to how much energy went into forming them and the purity, they were much stronger than the prices of other devils. He would need fewer pieces to reincarnate stronger people, but that was not the thing that shocked Ajuka. 3 mutation pieces? You were either insanely lucky or blessed. Romonus had lucked out and gotten a mutation queen, rook, and pawn, which was insanely lucky. How rare is mutation pieces, uncle? Only 1 in 10 devils have even a single one. You having 3 is 1 in 1,000 chance. I also need to inform you of a little-known trait I added to the evil piece system. Your pieces are linked to you, so unused pieces will grow accordingly. Even after they are used, as long as you and your servant grow stronger, they can mutate to match that new power. I fully expect you to form a peerage of monsters. Romonus smiled before he waved. He dismissed his pieces, which vanished into thin air. He already knew his first peerage member would come to him. Akino Himejima would make his first bishop, as the queen piece was not useful for her. All in all, today had proven to be a wonderful day. Chapter 19. Vinalana's Displeasure and Teasing. After Romonus collected his evil pieces, he did not delay long, as he did not have much reason to stay longer. He had nothing against Ajuka, as the man was technically his new uncle, but he did kill his relative, so he did not want to stick around. Though he didn't just leave, he had to be polite. Uncle, it has been nice talking to you. Anytime you can give me a lesson to improve? Ajuka gave a small smile. Next time I give Latia a lecture, come along. I might as well show I am the better teacher. It was still incredibly lucky of you to receive 3 mutation pieces. I can't wait to see what you will do with them. Romonus did not consider it luck, as he got those because of the power he had earned. He was 11 years old, and his power was growing by the day thanks to the great mentoring he received. A big part still took raw talent, which he had in spades. Combine that with hard work, which made him into a little monster. See you, uncle. With practiced ease, he created a teleport circle and returned to his mansion. As usual, he always chose his room, but he noticed something. The memories of his original coordinates were messed with. It did not seem that Ajuka did it himself, but rather the whole separate space had such an effect. Clever, that way no one can know where the core of the evil piece system is. Heaven had DxD, Gregory has Azazel, and we have Ajuka. Seems fair. Regardless, now that he had his evil pieces, he could begin to travel the world. He still wanted to get Akino before doing anything, as her lineage as a cadre was beyond valuable. He knew more than she did about herself, as he was not going to allow her to wallow in her trauma. It might be cruel, but he could and would not allow her to waste her holy lighting. He needed it to train his resistance to holy energies, and she would be an asset when he invaded the vampire realm for Valerie and Gasper. I should hold my horses. As long as I get Tobio and Akino, vampires will be the least of my worries. That isn't even counting me. He shook his head as he walked out of his room. He decided to go tell his mother, as he knew she would have far more free time than his father. If his father was not involved in the duties as the Lord of House Gremory, he was off *king his dime a dozen maids. While Romonus could respect the idea of such a large harem, each one was cheap. They were copies of each other with only different faces and hair colors with the same bodies. He shook his head at the idea of collecting a harem only for their looks. Regardless, he eventually arrived at his mother's office. It was where she often went to deal with the business calls or simply kept to herself. Mom, I got good news. When he opened the door and walked in, he saw his mother sitting with her head on the desk. When she heard him, she tilted her head a little to gaze at him with her purple eye. Romonus was quite surprised, as his mother looked depressed. Her hair was disheveled, she looked exhausted, and like she had not slept in days. That changed when she saw him, causing her to perk up. She rubbed her eyes a little as she tried to play it off. Romonus. Sorry, you had to see me like that. Did you get your pieces? Romonus did not answer as he walked over to her side. He reached out for her disheveled hair and with a bit of magic straightened it out for her. Mom, you look terrible. What happened? She sighed as she rested her chin on her arms. That obvious? He nodded with worry in his eyes. Yes. I have never seen you like this in my life. What can I do? She sat up and waved her hand to close the door to her office. She locked and warded everything so nothing got out. She clenched her hands as her face began to pull back into an expression of pure loathing. Do you remember Markina? Romonus nodded with squinted eyes. The black-haired bimbo? The one who was always in father's office sucking him off or F***ing him. Then Alana began to chuckle at the accurate description. The very same. I thought I was the only one who disliked her. He shook his head. I despise her kind the most. What did she do? Venelin took a deep breath as she broke the news. Your father in his infinite wisdom got the slut pregnant. I just found out from him myself last night. Romonus's face quickly warped into an expression of barely concealed wrath. His mother had explained to him that she and Zeoticus had one rule for him to have a harem. He could not get them pregnant, and that one rule had been broken. What was he thinking? He wasn't, as we can now see. Markina knew that was the rule, and either she, Zeoticus, or both had to use magic to prevent pregnancy. But that did not happen as now she was with a child. Seeing his angered expression made her feel glad he was on her side. Everyone in their society or social circle would congratulate and applaud him for his seemingly increased fertility. Her expense because it was the most important condition for him to have a harem. It was not respected, and now here they were. If the child happened to be male, it would be lucky to be born of House Gremory. It still made her smirk that she knew for a fact that the child would not have her clan trait. It was what made Surzex, Romonus, and Rias deadly. Without the power of destruction, the child sired by a commoner devil like Markina would probably not even have the Gremory trait. She almost felt bad, but not enough. That is what I am saying. I am livid beyond imagination. We had one simple condition. I manage and gather women for his harem, and he ensures they do not fall pregnant. But it seems that was not enough. Though, I should have kept it to myself. He shook his head. No. This is wrong, and he knows it. Then Alana leaned back, which caused her large breasts to push against her gown. For once, Romonus did not have an interest in enjoying the sight. Then Alana covered her eyes as she remembered the birthday ball. Love of my life, dance with me? King asshole. He will probably announce it soon to the family anyway. It's been just a month since your birthday, and he springs this news on me now. After saying that to me? And I feel for it hook, line, and sinker. Romonus waved his hand and formed a chair next to her. He sat down and leaned over to rest his head on her shoulder. She appreciated the gesture that her son was here to comfort her. Don't blame yourself, Mom. I always wondered how you felt about Father's harem. I guess you weren't on board. Then Alana's purple eyes began to grow wet as she wrapped her arms around him. He returned the embrace as she vented to him. I just grew used to it. When I married him, he didn't have a harem. But 150 years into our marriage, he asked me permission to have a harem. I did not agree to it at first, but I relented after he kept asking for the next 10 years. I allowed him to have 5 at first, but then it became 10. Now the number is almost 200. I have grown overwhelmed and sick with him as it seems he has less and less time for me. I know you don't care, but the last time we were intimate was 12 years ago. That was how you were born. For a time I was beginning to question our love, but the dance we had seemed to awaken old feelings. I thought he remembered our vows, and I felt like the young women he married. Turns out, I am just a fool. He held her tighter as he finally heard her true thoughts. How long have you felt this way, Mom? You should have said something sooner. Then Alana smiled in the firm, but gentle hold of her second-born. It had been long since she had received even this from her husband. For the last 400 years, I held solace that I was the only woman he had children with, but now even that is lost to me. Markina, that whore. My 1F***CKNG condition and the F***CKNG broke it. Waves of power of destruction surged from her, destroying everything it touched. She held him even tighter, but as Baal descended, he was immune to the effect. The chairs they were sitting on were safe, but everything else began to crumble. I didn't know you felt this way. I will be on your side. Always. Thank you. He just held her tighter as she wanted to reduce her office to ashes. However, then Alana calmed herself as she didn't want to affect his view of his father. Don't hate your father because of me. This is my burden as a female devil. We suffer in silence. Romonus, I know you want a harem. When you do decide to get it harem, don't follow the same route as your father. Appreciate every single one and don't neglect their hearts like he has mine. He nodded. I promise. She leaned over and rested her head against his. As they shared this moment, he asked her a question he had. What will you do, Mom? She sighed. What can I do? I am not Hera. He chuckled as that was true. His mom was far better than the goddess of marriage who gets cheated more than anyone else. True. Should I put some pressure on father? Despite his status, he is quite weak. Maybe place an impotence curse on him for a decade. Venelana giggled as that sounded fun. Teach me the ritual, but don't bother. I could fold him like a twig with a finger if I wanted. Don't forget, young man, I am, and have always been the strongest woman born to Clan Bale. Your talent came from me. Your father just provided the Gremory trait to you. Venelana leaned in and kissed his cheek. Come on, teach me that spell. He will learn not to piss me off. He smiled as he pulled out his journal and flipped the page to a very mean curse to the male kind. The impotence curse was made by a witch when her husband cheated on her. She did not remove this curse for the rest of his life, and the poor wizard was driven mad. When he showed Venelana the curse, her face pulled back into a very happy smile. Did McGregor teach you? He nodded. He taught me many spells, even ones you would not think would come in handy. This one is apparently a good prank one, as it can be broken by the caster whenever. She spat on the idea. I won't release him until 20 years have passed. I will show him. This would not hurt his father other than his pride, so he happily taught his mother the curse. As she learned it, he could not help but notice how beautiful his mother was. The way her pretty face looked when she focused on the book, the way her dress pulled attention to her enormous breasts that bounced with her movements. He was forced to look away, as she was far too XY for her own good. How could his father not please her first was beyond him. He just hoped she didn't notice the way he looked at her from time to time. But as if to inform him that she did, she let one of her breasts press against his arm. Romonus did not let it slip like that, but she looked quite happy to tease him. Incest was very common among their race, and these taboo relationships between relatives became more common with age. One became more open to things like this, especially when devils got older. In just a few short decades, she would be 1,000 years old, so why not be open to a few more things? She had time to spare, and her son would be growing into such a handsome young man. She could afford to let things slip in this direction, right? For now, this light teasing was as far as it got. Yes, Romonus has a big incest fetish. As for Venelana, well, she is unsatisfied, and her husband just broke her one rule. Chapter 20. Marcina's Reason and Marcina's Past. In the next few days, I might be getting sick with COVID. My sister caught it, and we are all getting sick. Once Romonus taught his mother the impotence curse, she thanked him and kissed him again on the cheek. Something she could pass off as a motherly act, but Romonus was no child. He had been a 17-year-old playboy in his past life, meaning he was technically 28. Nice. He smiled and kissed her back before leaving her alone. Good luck, Mom. She smiled and waved him goodbye. Thank you. Take care. When he closed the door, his smile dropped into an expression of pure wrath. Veins were popping all over his face. Marcina. He took a deep breath before from his body he released his mana sense. He searched the entire mansion and quickly found both his father and Marcina. His father was in his office alone for once, while the maid in question was far from him this time. Romonus released his fists and began to move rapidly through the mansion. As he did, he would pass some maids and servants who instantly got out of his way. It was very rare that he would get mad, but when he did, it was better to stay the F***ck out of his way. He even passed the ladies of his father's harem, who all recoiled at the sight of him. Some of them had been part of the harem for only a few years, while some had been here decades if not centuries. Marcina had been telling all of them about her pregnancy, which most knew was not going to end well for her. The child would be fine, as Venelana was not a monster, but she was not safe. Apparently, Romonus was going to get at her first. Some of them who were close to her for a few seconds considered speaking up for her, but they chose wiser than that. When he finally reached Marcina, the black-haired maid was tidying up a room with a big smile on her face. She was humming a happy tune as she sometimes rubbed her belly because she only had her looks and body. She had no wealth, status, bloodline, or clan, so being the mistress of a lord was the highest honor she could have. However, at that moment, Romonus slammed the door open, causing Marcina to jump up. She turned around and was met with one of the most terrifying sights, Romonus Gremory in his enraged state. His eyes were glowing a deep purple, and the sheer pressure of having an ultimate class being glaring down on her was like death was in front of her. What the F***ck were you thinking? Marcina dropped her broom and backed away to the very back of the room. When she touched the wall, she recoiled in horror, as even if Zeoticus was here, he could not compare to his son in strength. Zeoticus was only a high-class devil thanks to his noble lineage, as he had rarely trained. Romonus was a whole class ahead of his father, and his entire focus was on her. Young master, what do you mean? I dash. Romonus waved his hand and shut the door behind him. He walked toward her and placed his hands behind her head, making her look into his glowing eyes. I know about the baby. Marcina got a terrifying premonition. Wait, this is Dash. Romonus cut her off. You knew the rules. You can join the harem, and you ensure you do not get pregnant. It was the only condition, and you broke it. Whose idea was it? Yours? My father? Who? Marcina held her hands over her belly in fear. It was mine. Don't blame your father, I talked him into it. He punched the wall behind her, shattering it. She closed her eyes in terror as she looked at the floor. If devils had a god, she would have been praying. Was what? What were you expecting? To gain more status? Control of the clan? Authority? You were trying to create a competitor for my tireless heir. Was that it? Markina shook her head in horror at the last part. Many heirs would do anything to secure their positions. If Romonus felt challenged by her child, he could rip it out of her right now, and no one could stop him. No, I couldn't dream of that. Then what was it? Markina fell to her knees as she tried to calm him down. I wanted nothing. I just wanted to be a mother. Please don't take my baby, I beg you, young master. I took care of you as an infant. I just wanted to have a child of my own. If it pleases you, I can leave, disappear from your sight, and raise it alone. Just don't take it from me. She hugged his legs as she kept crying. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up into his unrelenting purple eyes. He snarled as he looked up. God damn it. Instantly, he was hit with a head-splitting headache which he endured with pure will. Markina though recoiled as she held her head with both hands. He snarled, this was making me feel a certain way, and it was not good. Now he felt like a monster, as it was true that she had breastfed him as a kid. It was only in the last 5 years that he and Mother began to think negatively of her because of how often she took Zeodicus's time. I am not going to hurt your child, that is still my siblings. I am just mad you hurt my mother's feelings. You are lucky we are not monsters, or that would have been the first thing we would have done. And I do remember you always looking after me specifically, so consider yourself forgiven. By me, you still have to get my mother's forgiveness. You will give birth to the child, and then you, and every member of the harem, will receive an anti-pregnancy rune from me. Do I make myself clear? She nodded with a thankful expression on her terrified face. She hugged his legs again. Yes. Anything. Thank you, young master. Okay, let go of me. When she let go, Romonus snorted and grabbed her arm to lift her. If you thought I was mad, my mother will make your life hell after the birth. So you better raise that kid with all the love you can. I will, young master. Romonus took a deep breath as he walked off. When he was gone, Markina fell to her knees and cooped her belly. Her face was covered in tears as she promised herself to avoid incurring the wrath of Venelana even more. She stood up to beg for forgiveness so her baby could have the best life. Because if her child chooses to challenge Romonus for the position as heir, it will die. Romonus was the strongest devil of his generation by far, and it was suspected that in a few short years, he would become a second Cerzex or beyond. Venelana, now that she had the punishment for her negligent husband, was much happier. She was going to be using this in the coming days, but her good mood was ruined when Markina herself entered her office. She wondered what she could have wanted, but her falling on her hands and knees was not what she expected. Markina begged for forgiveness and tried to appease the lady of the house. She explained that after she turned 250 years old, the time she spent with Romonus and Rias had made her desire for motherhood grow. She had convinced Zeodicus to forego protection, and by some luck, the red-haired devil now had a fourth child on the way. Venelana was not happy to see her, but she did forgive her. As Romonus said, they were not monsters, just very angry. Venelana made it clear that she was to take it easy until the birth, but then she would be worked like a dog as her assistant. She did need someone to help her out in managing all the Gremory business. Markina was over the moon that she would not be fired and got to keep her child. In the end, this was a learning moment for everyone, except Zeodicus, who would soon be left with a harem he could not touch. The next day, Romonus did not wake up early like he usually did. He slept in for a little longer and woke up around 8:30 a.m. It was a good thing someone like him did not need to go to school if they did not want to. His learning under McGregor was considering enough teaching, so he was fine to do as he pleased. When he woke up, he jumped out of bed, and with magic he removed his clothes and rapidly got dressed into his John Wick suit. It was drippy, and considering he made it from his demonic energy, quite durable. He still wanted to get one professionally made from expensive materials, but for now, this was fine. He waved his hand through his hair and fixed it up a little. He played with his tie as he had a date today with Miria, who finally agreed to go with him. He did not blame her for waiting this long, as he was 11, but at this point, he was at the point of rapid growth. A few years were quite fast at her age, so she was willing to wait for him to grow up. She had refused his advances for the past 2 years after all. Once he felt he was well dressed, he pulled out his phone and gave her a call. Miria was currently having a panic attack as she was pulling every outfit from her wardrobe from her past. She had a secret that only Rahvdall and a few people knew. She was the very last living member of Clan Amdusias. She came from the line of the first-generation Amdusias, but now she was all that remained. All the wealth of her clan was hers, but she rarely touched it. Still, now that she was going on an actual date, she kept pulling out outfit after outfit, with none of them being good enough. Too fancy. Too simple. Gross. Too revealing. No. Too concealing. What am I going to wear? Wait, why am I taking this so seriously? He is a kid. I bet I can throw on anything and he will like it. That line of thought lasted a few seconds before she remembered that Romonus was no brat. He was mature beyond his years and looked nothing like a young boy. Thanks to Devil's innate control over themselves, his face looked quite mature. Who am I kidding? Romonus isn't a child. He will care. She cooped her face in horror, but that became even worse when she heard her phone go off. She looked around and saw it on her bed. She jumped over, and when she saw it was Romonus calling, she shrieked. No. She grabbed it and answered as fast as she could. Hello, Romonus? Calling already? Romonus on the other end chuckled. Well, I wanted to see where you wanted to go. I have a few ideas. We can go to the capital or we can go somewhere else. The Gremory estate is in the middle of a very large town, so we could spend the time down here. There are a few nice places I can think of. Miria's brain froze for a few seconds before she agreed. Sounds good. Great. See you at 4. When he hung up, Miria dropped her phone before panicking even more. I agreed to go to his territory. What will his mother say? She imagined Lady Venelana thinking she was a fox who devoured young boys. However, it was Romonus who was the wolf devouring the fox. Miria suddenly smiled as she remembered something. Wait, why am I scared of Venelana? I fought in the Great War, damn it. Which she did as well. Oh well, if we fought I bet I'd win. In all honesty, she was not so sure herself because Clan Amdushia's trait was considered one of the greatest at raw destruction. Demonic lightning was the opposite of Barakiel holy lightning. Amdushias in the Ars Goetia is the Lord of Thunder, so demonic lightning. Chapter 21, Soul Mutation and a Promise. Once Romonus hung up the call with Miria, he realized that he had another 7 hours before they had to meet up. Instead of doing anything too time-consuming, he sat himself down on his bed and pulled out the Soul Grimoire. He was getting extremely close to truly unlocking his soulscape, and that would unlock many new paths to power. Power was not the goal, it was a means to an end that he enjoyed. He enjoyed the feeling of growing stronger day by day, and now that he had his evil pieces, his travels through the world could begin. Canon started in 7 years while the prequel/dog started in 2. Just those big events would change the world, and he was going to intervene. In 2 years, his biggest challenger would be Saturnal, who will steal Arondite from Azazel. Saturnal, just like the other cadre of Gregory, were ancient beyond imagination. They were created ages ago by God, meaning each one had uncountable years of experience. Even the fool Kokobeel was a massive threat, which once again made him remember someone. Vasco Strata was a regular human who not only defeated but forced Kokobeel to flee for his life during WW2. While he did wield Durandal, it still meant that Vasco had gotten stronger than Kokobeel in a few decades. Despite the ages of time, Kokobeel had to grow stronger, and his innate racial advantages, he had been beaten by a regular human. Damn loser. Romonus cut all thoughts from his mind and began to study the grimoire once more. His mind fell into a trance once more as the knowledge of the grimoire and words was sent into his mind. The more he read, the more he understood about souls and how to reach his soul. This understanding caused time to begin to flow as his entire focus went into comprehending the information entering his mind. He did not know how long went on, but something eventually clicked. The magical feeling of connecting to his soulscape was a profound experience. When he gazed at his soul, he saw an interesting sight. His soul, as he expected, was about as large as he was, at least in the soulscape. What intrigued him the most was the color of his soul. Half was red and the other half was a bright blue. As he gazed at his soul, he realized why this was. His soul was half devil, half human. Going from a human body into a devil body had caused this split in his soul. Interesting. My soul has both sides of myself. My past as the human Andrew, and this one is the devil Romonus. Both are me in the end, but it seems my soul was undecided which I was. Well, I am both. He had always known that, but now that he was this close to his soul, it was the push he needed. Under his gaze, the two sides and colors of his soul began to merge before him. I see. Before this, my human soul had been the core of my existence as my devil side grew against it. Not anymore. The blue and red sides of his soul merged and became purple, the same as his eyes. This merge seemed to have been massive as the power radiating off his soul seemed to double. His soul even grew in size rapidly as the fusion had just given him a unique soul. Not even half-devils had souls like him because they had always been half-devils. He, on the other hand, was a human with an established soul placed into a devil body during gestation. Now, he could truly claim to have the soul of a true hybrid, a Cambion. The increased power and size of his unique soul instantly forced him back into his body. His body was instantly flooded by the increased soul energy coming from his soul. Romonus closed his grimoire and focused on this magical experience of having the energy of the soul in his body. He began to circulate his demonic energy through his body to make sure his soul energy reached every part of his body. This process took half an hour, but eventually, all the energy in his body settled down and fused into his tissues. When he eventually opened his eyes, his purple eyes were glowing a deep purple as his body and soul had been attuned beyond other beings. Instantly, he felt every single one of his senses double in power, his sense of hearing, his sight, his smell, touch, and even his spiritual senses. He could sense his surroundings better than ever, and he felt this was more to this than even he understood. Romonus did not realize it himself, But when his devil and human sides, he had removed several limiters put in place by Lucifer in his creation. Devils were artificially created from the body of Lilith. They were created to be weapons, and allowing them to grow too powerful would challenge his control. So limits were put in place to prevent them from becoming too powerful. But his death and gods had weakened those restrictions, leading to the births of Ajuka and Surzex. Romonus had not been born a super devil, but he could not be compared to a regular devil either. He was effectively the half-step between the devil race and super devils. Now, with any restrictions placed on his soul gone, his power began to grow rapidly. Romonus sat up from his bed and took a deep breath as he felt his power grow as a result of his Cambion soul. He did not consider it a large jump, but he had reached the high point of the ultimate class. He exhaled once his power stopped growing, and a smirk rose on his face. He had once again made a massive leap in a short amount of time. He wanted to spend time training, but instead, he pulled out his phone. When he checked the time, he saw that it was 1 now. Damn, that took a while. Romonus set an alarm for 3:30 p.m. and sat down on his bed cross-legged as he began to try to get his power under control. The next 2 hours were with him carefully settling down his soul and writhing demonic energy which needed to be stabilized. His greatest asset was his control over his demonic energy, so he spent that time carefully bringing it under control. Luckily, by the time his alarm went off, he had managed to achieve his goal. This time he grabbed his phone and called Miria. When she answered, she had finally managed to find an outfit she liked and felt he would like too. She looked at herself in the mirror once more before she nodded to herself. It was a more casual outfit, as while this was a date, she didn't want to come off as desperate. It wouldn't be good for her esteem if even an 11-year-old rejected her. Image here. She picked up the phone to not risk the call getting cut. I am ready. Romonus was worried she was going to take longer like most women when they were getting ready. Seemed that 7 hours was enough time for her to get ready. Great. Can't wait to see you. Just wondering if you want me to pick you up, or if you come to me. Or we can meet halfway. Miria thought about it before making up her mind. I have never been to the Gremory estate, so mind picking me up? He smiled as he in no way minded picking up a beautiful woman like her. Then again, teleportation made everything so damn simple. Mind sending me your location? I will be there soon. She smiled as she sent him the location of her home. Thanks to the wealth of her extinct clan, she was living well and did not need to work at all. She only worked as a guard for Rahvdall's castle because it was easy and she could keep herself busy. Being a devil meant one had a lot of free time, so unless you wanted to spend decades at a time asleep, this was the best choice. As for Romonus, once he got the location of her home in the city of Lilith, he teleported there directly. He did not know what to expect when he arrived, but teleporting outside a quite large mansion was not it. Then again, Miria is an ultimate class devil, so she must have a way to acquire money. He cleared his voice as he walked toward the door. He pulled out his phone and called Miria, who answered. I'm here. She perked up, and with a burst of purple demonic lightning, she rushed through her house to the entrance. When she opened the door, there were still purple sparks crackling from her body. However, he was in no way focused on the lightning and only on her. He smiled as he reached out and took one of her hands. You look stunning. She blushed as she stepped out of her home. Thank you. And I have to say, this suit of yours is nice. You ever think of getting one professionally made? He nodded as she closed her door behind her. I have. It is merely formed of demonic energy, but having one professionally made would make it better and more durable. But this is not about my suit. This is about you. Ready to go. She smiled as she held his arm, which caused her large breasts to push into his arm. He grinned as every devil had a sin they were closer to. In his opinion, if he had a sin, he was closest to his pride. I am. Romonus opened a teleport circle under their feet, and in a flash of light, both of them appeared in the middle of the Gremory town. When they arrived, Miria instantly began to look around in curiosity. Wow, so this is the capital of the Gremory estate? He nodded. Effectively, because it was built around the main estate. While the Gremory territory is massive, the previous heads of the clan wanted nature to be preserved, so large environmental destruction was avoided. On another note, the town is quite a popular tourist attraction as it has several restaurants, hotels, bars, and many famous street vendors. Got anything in mind? Miria thought about it a little before she turned to him. Let's save the restaurant for last. How about we just explore and talk? You have been all flirty for the past 2 years. I bet you want to know more about me, right? He nodded. I do. Hard to believe a lady as strong as you is a regular guard. And I have been meaning to ask about your sword. It's a great sword, but it looks like a giant katana. Then there was the purple lightning, all very intriguing, my lady. Mira smiled as she answered. I guess I can tell you. My name is Miria Amdusias of the extinct clan Amdusias. My clan fought through the entire Great War on the front lines. When my clan was created, our ancestor led 29 legions of devils, but millennia of conflict reduced us to nothing. My father was effectively the last Lord Amdusias until he died in the Civil War. He fought on the side of the current Satans, but he lost his life to Demedosus Oracle Asmodeus before Rahvdall arrived, leaving me the sole heir of the clan. However, with his death, in no legions there was no clan. The line of Amdushias will die with me unless I can have a child. But you saw my luck with dating. Now that he thought about it, why was her luck so bad? Why are you single? I would think you would be swarmed with suitors. Miria began to twirl a lock of her purple hair as she said her embarrassing secret. I get set off very easily and have a habit of throwing them through walls. They spread a rumor that it was my way to test suitors. Romonus tried to keep a straight face, but he started to chuckle at her funny reason. That is so dumb, but I am glad those fools were dumb because I would have lost my chance with a beauty like you. I want to get to know you better, Miria, and if you want to wait until I am 18, that is fine by me. Miria looked into his purple eyes and leaned over to rest her head on his shoulder. You just know what to say, you little brat, but there is no need. Don't bother waiting until you turn 18. Just keep doing a good job. Suddenly he had an idea. Miria, would you be willing to join my peerage in time? Someone like you would be a great rook, and I bet you could even surpass the original with some more guidance. She thought about it before she smiled. Let's say I will consider it. You just got to convince me. You can bet on it, my lady. I would love to have you as a wife. She blushed. Not a mistress? I know about your engagement. She knows about my desire for a harem, but unlike most devil nobles who want mistresses, I don't. I want ladies I can call wives. But why speak of the future when it still isn't here? Miria liked the sound of that. Consider yourself having some extra points. So far, who have you sunk your claws into? You and Sarah fall besides Latia. She couldn't help but smile as they went on their way through the town. She truly was having a good time as despite his age, Romonus felt more like a young man than a kid. That was thanks to having 28 years of life experience after all. But he truly liked talking to her. She was fun. Rook 1 found. Chapter 22. A promise next time and plot moves closer. I just realized I could have Romonus have heterochromia. 1 blue, 1 purple. Maybe I still can. Romonus since his past life had a thing for mature women rather than girls his age. He did not know if their maturity or motherly attitudes made him desire them, but Miria checked all his boxes. She was powerful without a doubt, had a great loving personality once one got to know her, was fun to be around, and was drop-dead gorgeous. He gripped her arm a little firmer, which she noticed. She honestly stated the obvious. I have wanted to ask this, but did you get taller? It's a noticeable change. He smiled as this was a benefit to having so much demonic energy on top of his elevated life force thanks to his Tuki. His growth was rapid as he could endure the elevated growth rate. I did. It's either a result of all my training, but my body is being forced to grow to tolerate the pressure. Then there is puberty, so yes. She reached out and ran her hand through his face. Ever thought of growing a beard? I'd make you look more mature. He thought about it as his uncle and grandfather both had impressive beards. Surzex kept himself clean-shaven while his father had barely a goatee. I would not mind having a thick beard. I bet it would make me look even manlier. She nodded with a dreamy expression. It certainly would. It'd draw out the pressure of those purple eyes of yours. He leaned in to look her in the eyes, which matched his own eyes. Something we share. Any reason for that? She blushed as she made a fun fact known. My grandmother was from the Bale clan branch family. She was married off because she did not get the power of destruction, and neither did her child, my father. Even I didn't get it either. He stayed silent for a while, and she thought he was going to say something else. Instead, he opened his big mouth. So you're saying we are related? Hot. She blushed as she lightly bonked him on the head. She tried to do it lightly, but it was still a serious blow for a weaker man. He was used to it because of Graphia, who often bonked him on the head for any number of reasons. Pervert. He just smiled as they walked through the town. While he did not come down here often, he was still famous as he was the next heir of Gremory. He was easy to spot because of his standout features, black hair and purple eyes, among the crimson and blue-eyed Gremory. Some of the commoners were pointing and whispering about his date. He and Miria noticed them pulling out their phones. Phones were a new invention to the underworld, but they were easily accessible to the common people, even to the devils who preferred medieval architecture rather than modern buildings. Instead of allowing them to do what they wanted, he waved his fingers as thin treads of power of destruction snatched people's phones away. They all could only watch as their phones were held away from them. They looked back to him, who had squinted eyes. This is your first warning. Mind your business. Miria whistled at the micro-control he had over his power of destruction. Wow, I heard it is tricky to control. It's just because no one has tried. Come on, I know several sights to see. Lead the way, mister. He chuckled as he began to walk her around the town's many tourist attractions. Before they left, he returned the phones to the nosy people who would learn to not bother him again. As for Romonus and his date, the first place he took her to was the statue of Romonus Gremory. It was a large statue of Romonus in full war attire of her during the Great War. Though, the statue made her look like a full-grown woman rather than her true teenager-like look. When Miria saw the statue, she sighed. Your progenitor? He nodded. The progenitor of House Gremory, she is dead. Miria shook her head. Such a tragedy, 72 first-generation devils, and most of them are dead. I know House Bale's ancestor Zekrom is alive, but the other surviving clans are not very revealing. He shook his head. They are either so injured that they cannot heal, dead, or kept in suspended animation to prolong their lives. I do not think, though. Come on, we got better places to be. Miria followed him as he led her to a very famous tourist site at the Gremory town, a petting zoo for many different breeds of camel from the underworld and the human world. When they arrived, Miria beamed a little as she liked animals. House Gremory is associated with camels only because my ancestor thought they were cute. Miria ran her hand down the face of a camel called the giant camel, named such because it was the size of a house. She wasn't wrong. While she petted that one, he walked over to a pair of camels which were isolated from the rest. The reason was because these two were predatory camels named the Flash Terror Camel. They were huge, around the size of an elephant. These two belonged to him personally as they were gifted to him when he was 8. They were much more muscular than other camels and their humps were tiny. Unlike normal camels, these did not go long periods without feeding thanks to their meat eating. It allowed them to spend less energy on a hump and more on prey drive. They were bright red and black with large fangs in their mouths. He jumped into their pen with them and instantly they walked over. When they reached him, they lowered their heads for him to pet them. Miria noticed and called out to him. What are those called? Flesh Terror Camels. They're mine. He hugged their big heads and watched as they closed their big heads in joy. Miria walked over to watch him. What are their names? The male is named Jackal and the female is named River. Miria was interested in the names. Any reason for the names? He shook his head as he turned around. Nope, just what came to mind. While he was talking, an employee noticed him in the pen and instantly walked over. The man was pot-bellied and balding, which showed just how little this devil looked after himself. Ah, young master here to see your animals? He nodded. How have they been? The man rubbed his head a little as he explained. They are ravenous as usual. They are quite tame, all things considered, but I think they miss you at times. Romonus turned to look at them and noticed them nod sadly. He smiled as he scratched their chins a little. I see. In that case, I think I will ask my parents to build a pen for them near the mansion. It will mean I can see them more often. Instantly, Jackal and River began to bellow in joy, but it caused every other camel to bellow as well. Romonus smiled as he jumped out of the large pen. Behave okay? Both camels nodded as they were intelligent, scarily so. He walked over to Miria, who took his arm again. The portly devil walked off, of Romonus as usual was not very social. Instead, he focused all his attention on Miria. She seemed to be having a good time. So, anything else you want to see? She thought about it before she looked toward him. Is there anything more? He smiled as he brought up an idea. I know of a bar with great drinks. Considering we're Devil's Dash. She thought about it, but shook her head. She got violent when she got drunk, and at her level of strength, only Romonus would be safe. For the safety of everyone, it's best if I don't touch alcohol. She chuckled as she looked ashamed. Don't worry about it. It's not for everyone. Instead, want to have a meal before you return home. She smiled and leaned over to rest her head on his shoulder. Let me enjoy this. In a few months, we won't be the same height anymore. Let me enjoy still being taller than you. He leaned over as well and rested his head against hers. When's your next day off? I get 2 every week. Tuesday and Wednesday. Want to go again next week? She nodded as they started to walk again. Of course. If you will have this old lady. Any day, my lady. From there, Miria and Romonus decided to end the day at a fancy restaurant. They spent 2 hours both trying different dishes and simply talking. It was funny that after knowing her for 2 years, he still knew very little about her, and vice versa. Regardless, he enjoyed every second he spent with her. When the date finally came to an end, he teleported her back to her home. Romonus turned to face her as she seemed to be beaming with joy. You smiling ear to ear. Was it that fun? She nodded as she grabbed her face. It's the first time I didn't throw a date through a wall. He began to laugh as it was such a funny thing to hear. She pouted as he tried to stop laughing. I am sorry, it's such a funny reason. I loved our time together and can't wait to do it again. Just as he was about to leave, Miria beat him to it. She reached out and grabbed his suit jacket to pull him in. She landed a quick kiss on his lips before she looked away. Consider that a promise. His face beamed into a grin as she knew how to feed his pride. Consider your promise returned. He wrapped his arms behind her back and one behind her head to turn her to face him. He leaned in and returned her kiss. He smiled as he released her and opened a circle under his feet. Keep in touch. When he teleported back home, Miria could not stop smiling. I won't die alone. I have a chance to keep my line alive. In a few years, of course. She entered her house giggling the whole way. Following the date he had with Miria, Romonus now had the numbers of 3 women: Latia, Rahvdall, and Mira. He also had Ria's phone, but since he saw her every day, she didn't count. Thanks to the fact that school was not eating up hours of his day, he had a lot of free time to spend how he pleased. Most nobles would spend that time wasting their time on their hobbies, duties, or any number of things. He spent a big chunk in training and now paying attention to the women he was involved in. So far, still manageable, which meant the smaller harem was much better than his father's catch-them-all harem. He could give them the time they wanted and he had time for himself. A win-win situation, which was how he spent the next 5 months. Most of the time was spent in pure training under his mentors or his self-study. Another part was spent on him going out with his fiancée and 2 girlfriends as he called them. He always was open about who he was with, so they already knew about each other. Latia was fine with them, but she did wonder why he was going after old devils rather than girls his age. She just wrote it off as a kink as he filled her kink muscles with brains. Regardless, Romonus was living his best life until he was called into his father's office. When Romonus entered the office, it was noticeable he had grown over the past 5 months. As he said, it had slowed a bit, but he still grew another 2.5 inches in that time. He even was starting to fill out on more muscle thanks to puberty. Father. When he looked at his father, the red-haired devil looked a bit stressed out now that his member did not work. Romonus felt a bit bad, but his mother was not relenting, so this was the punishment. His father was not alone, though, as next to him was his Bishop Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. The man was a 16th-century German philosopher, physician, jurist, theologian, and occult writer until he was reincarnated as a devil. More interesting was that he was the vice-chief engineer of the Demonic Power Research Institute organized by his brother Sir Zex. Romonus turned to the man and asked, "Sir Heinrich, you don't normally visit. Something wrong?" He ran a hand through his floor, reaching his beard. "More interesting than anything. You see, your father has a contract with a young man in Kuo. He was possessed by a spirit, but before we could help him, he was helped by a young girl. Black hair, violet eyes, with the aura of a fallen. We see she has hidden herself in an abandoned temple." Zeoticus turned to Romonus, who was growing into a terrifying young man. "Son, we brought you here to ask if you were interested in adding her to your peerage. Aquino is here." He nodded. "I am." Zeoticus nodded. "All right then. Heinrich here is willing to go with you in case anything goes amiss." Romonus nodded as he placed a hand on Blooddrinker. "Let's go then." Heinrich walked over to Romonus, and he teleported them to Kuo, to the temple in question. This was a side story of the light novel in Volume 15 where Rhea saved Aquino. Instead, Romonus will be the one. Chapter 23, Reverse Gravity and Change of Plans. Okay, I shall remain purple, as the more I think about it, the more I like them purple. Also, a genderbent Valley is always good, but should I genderbent Issei, or just kill him? Haven't decided yet. When Romonus and Heinrich teleported into Kuo, Romonus took a deep breath as he was reminded that this was the home of Issei Huidu, and while he had no issue with the boy, he had a mission to accomplish. His boss had made one request in exchange for this amazing life he was living: cause as much chaos as he could. What would cause more chaos than ridding the world of its chosen one? Just as he was distracted, Heinrich spoke up. "Young master, are you all right?" Romonus turned to face the man and nodded. "I am fine. Let us not delay and find the girl before something gets to her. At once." In Kuo there was an abandoned church because Christianity had long since spread here, but Shinto was still more common. There was also one abandoned Shinto temple, which was where Aquino had hidden herself in Canon. Rias, for whatever reason in the novel version, had either not noticed that Aquino snuck away or let her go. Thankfully, he was not Rias, and his senses were far greater than Rias was at age 11 in the novel. Regardless, Romonus and Heinrich quickly arrived at the site of the temple. When they arrived at the temple, Romonus began to channel his soul energy into his eyes. It was one of the soul techniques he had created since he unlocked his unique soul. It caused his eyes to glow a deep purple, as this technique he called Eyes of the Soul. He called it as such because when he used it, he could see the souls of people. And right in the temple, he saw a unique non-human soul. Here you are. Aquino was 11 at this time, as she was the same age as him and Rias. Only that thanks to his power, unique soul, and Tuki, he grew faster than his sister. Romonus opened his mouth. "We don't mean you any harm. I can promise you that, but I cannot say the same for the hunters on the way here. They seem to be coming here." At his words, he could feel the fluctuations in Aquino's soul as she knew who they were. Just like with Rias, he could see how she tried to sneak out of the temple from a side entrance, but he just smirked. He lightly tapped the ground with his foot and vanished as he used his master Suji's technique, Godspeed, and appeared right behind Aquino without her noticing. He reached down and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ah." He let go and watched as she fell to the ground in fear. She looked up at him with terror as she looked into his dark, glowing purple eyes. "Ah, seems I scared you." He turned off his Eyes of the Soul and kneeled. He took her hand and helped her back to her feet. "Don't be afraid. If I wanted to harm you, I could have done from the start." Aquino took his hand as he helped her to sit up. She did not seem to trust him, but he would not either, as she was raised with devils being the enemy. "You're not." Romonus shook his head. "No. My name is Romonus Gremory, heir to the Gremory clan. You see, you helped a man who had a contract with my father." Aquino looked to the ground and asked something. "Did I do something wrong?" You did the right thing in helping someone in need? That does not deserve to be punished, but to be rewarded. If you will give me a chance to explain myself, I am sure you will be interested. First, what is your name? Akino answered in a whisper. Akino Himejima. He of course knew all this and more than her. Ah, from the Himejima clan, yes? Are you being hunted for being a fallen angel? Akino's eyes instantly shot open as he knew what she was. If he wanted he could kill her, and suddenly trusting who was called the enemy this whole time was not easy. No, I am human. He reached out and ruffled her hair. Relax, I don't hate fallen angels. I have no reason to, as I respect them just as I would any other person. Can you stand? She nodded. I can. He stood up and lifted her off the ground. You look gaunt, exhausted, and in pain. How long have you been this way? Akino was about to answer when from the forest near the tipple a familiar sound echoed. The sound of rings ringing together followed by a light slam. Romonus knew these were the hunters who not only killed Akino's mother but also Akino's granduncle. Heinrich quickly took his place next to Romonus, but it was unneeded as Romonus was stronger. He picked up Akino with one hand, causing her to look over to him in his large, powerful arms. He gave her a confident smile and reassured her. Just relax, I am the strongest. As the sound came closer, a voice echoed from the forest. There you are, the cursed daughter was born from our bloodline. A shame we must expunge. Another voice echoed with it. The girl born of Barakiel and Shuri. From the forest, several exorcists of the Himejima clan exited in their Miko attire, and one with the staff. Each one wore woven hats. From the look of it, there were quite a few of them. He squinted his eyes at the sight. Not even a challenge. The man with the staff looks up and smiles. It has been a while, Akino. Akino began to quiver in his arms as the man seemed to not be looking at him at all. The man took off his woven hat and looked at Akino in Romonus's arms with sad eyes. Romonus snorted. You know I am right here, right? Sua Himejima turned to face him with a calm expression. I did see you. I just didn't think you were worth notice, devil. Even if I must get rid of you, I will rid the Himejima clan of its shame today. You understand me, right? Romonus snorted. What can a bunch of humans possibly do? With a thought around Romonus, 15 purple glowing spears began to form. Suta recoiled in horror. Stay your hand. Harm us and our gods shall descend upon Y. Before he could finish speaking, the 15 spears lodged themselves in each hunter's gut. However, they did not feel any pain as those were spears of pure gravity. Instead, each hunter suddenly felt themselves feeling very light. Romonus smiled and waved them goodbye. Be careful coming down. It's very tricky to not go splat. Heinrich and Akino watched as the 15 hunters began to rapidly rise into the air. They screamed and launched fireballs down, but Romonus merely sidestepped. He waved his hand and caused a powerful gust of wind to blow them far away. That should keep them floating for about 20 minutes. Heinrich did not get what just happened. How did you do that? Inverted gravity spears. They make what they have so little gravity they just fly away. And when it starts to weaken they will fall with little threat to their lives. I saved Akino and took care of the Himejima clan, and they will live another day. We're averted, yes. Heinrich rubbed his beard and smiled. I see. I will leave the rest to you, young master. Romonus did not need guarding as he was a legendary existence because of his young age. Day by day he neared the power of the old Satans and even the new ones. He teleported away, leaving Romonus and Akino alone. Now that she was safe, Romonus put her down. He patted her head before he turned to the forest with his eyes of the soul activated once more. Azazel, you can come out now? A small chuckle came from the forest as Azazel walked out of the forest dressed in his usual red open-chest coat. Man, you certainly live up to your reputation, kid, but if you mind me asking, are you actually 11? Romonus smiled. I am just growing fast, possible mutation like my brother. Azazel nodded. Cool, anyways you called me out here for something. I was going to keep to myself now that I saw that Akino was alive. Romonus looked down at Akino. Why did her father not come? Akino recoiled at the words that Azazel pointed to. That is why. He wanted to and would have, but I did not let him. He and Akino are hurt right now, and neither can face the other. He is shamed and hurt by the death of his wife, and Akino blames him. Not a good combination. Akino kept silent as Azazel was the leader of her father's organization. Romonus placed a hand on Akino's head and put her to sleep. He caught her into his arms and picked her up as he walked over to Azazel. It's a good thing one of you is keeping an eye on her. No way she would have survived in the least alone. Now that I have you here, I have some things to talk to you about. Azazel was now curious. You want to talk to me? Romonus nodded. I respect you, Azazel, and I see quite a bit of benefit to cooperation between us. For one, you got a phone. Azazel pulled out a fancy phone he made himself. Here you are. Do you want my number? How forward? Romonus snorted as he and Romonus exchanged phone numbers. Pass me the phone number of Barakiel so I can send him updates on Akino's well-being. Plus, I will need his advice on how to train her. Azazel sighed. You going to add her to your peerage? Romonus nodded. I am. The moment I turn her, she will be a triple hybrid of devil, fallen angel, and human. She will need careful mentoring to be stronger. She has been suppressing her bloodline for too long, and I will not have that. Plus, I will need her holy lightning for my training. Azazel could guess what Romonus intended to do. Ouch. You plan for her to zap you over and over until you become resistant to holy energies, don't you? Your funeral. But if you want my help in your training, I recommend taking baths with diluted holy water while you keep healing yourself through the pain. Increase the concentration until you are bathing in pure holy water. Do that along with the cultivation tribulation, as I will call it, which you want to undergo in the day when you are so resistant to holy energies will come. Romonus took all this information to heart. Thanks, Azazel. Also, how's the White Dragon Emperor? Azazel did not expect that. How did you know about her? Her. Romonus played it off a bit. I heard a rumor that the White Dragon Emperor was in your employee. I just wanted to ask how one of the two heavenly dragon hosts was doing. Azazel was less than happy to answer, but he gave a basic answer. Good, all things considered. If we are to be in contact like this, I might as well tell you that she is descended from the original Lucifer. Romonus scoffed. Damn, that is a strong brat. Azazel nodded. More than you know. Well then, I should get going. I will text you Barakiel's number, so keep in touch. You are young and already this powerful, and you don't hate fallen angels. How do you feel about angels themselves? Just blonde fallen angels. Azazel barely held a snort, as that was the least and most accurate description of things. We are going to get along well, Romonus. Who knows, I might even throw in a piece of advice here or there. Romonus waved him goodbye. Take care, Azazel. Keep in touch. I will. With that, Azazel teleported away, leaving Romonus with a sleeping Aquino. First, I gotta check up on Issei. I got to make sure that he didn't get gender bent into a pervy girl like Aika or something. Then I got to check up on Markina to make sure she wasn't giving birth to another reincarnator. I will not allow a competitor to exist. From his back, his massive demonic wings emerged as he took off into the sky toward Kuo. Chapter 24. The Demon's Word. Okay, the votes are in, and we go for red and white empresses. Even the image for Valina has been voted on. Enjoy a longer chapter than normal. Once he was high above Kuo, Romonus released his spiritual sense as he searched the entire town for Issei or his parents. Aquino was still in his arms, calmly snoozing away from the sleep spell as he used his superior processing power to search the entire town. After a quick search, Romonus was quick to not only find the house in question but also Mickey and Gudahuadu. Found you. Romonus flapped his wings down and he landed outside the house. When Romonus searched the house with his spiritual sense, he found what he was looking for. He, of course, saw the two parents of Issei and someone else. Okay, what the hell is going on? Instead of a young boy like what he expected, he instead saw a small brown-haired girl that looked a little tomboyish. She wore a pair of shorts and a red hoodie. Romonus for a few seconds did not know how to take this information. Okay, this world is one of those worlds. A female Vala and Issei like in some fanfics I read? Why though? Is my existence enough to change everything so strongly? I mean, change something in the fate of a world and stuff is bound to vary. Just as he was thinking about broken fate and its effects, the small girl sat up and walked into the kitchen. He focused on the conversation that started. Mom, Dad, can I go out? Goro looked up from his paper and nodded. Of course, just be careful of any strange boys out there, you hear? Mickey lightly smacked him on the head. Please, Goro, don't scare her. Go on, Itsuki. The small girl hugged her parents both before she ran outside. Romonus by that time stepped off the ground and appeared on top of the house as she ran off into the town. As he watched us go, Romonus squinted his eyes as he wondered what would affect fate more. He kills her regardless of her not being Issei, turning her into his servant, or leaving her as a free agent. For now, though, he looked at Aquino in his arms and opened a teleport circle in front of him. He placed Aquino down into it and teleported her into his room. The spell he placed on her would keep her asleep for a few hours, so he had time. Now that she was safe, he activated Godspeed once more and appeared in front of Itsuki. She, of course, did not expect him to appear in front of her, causing her to run straight into him. Since she was so small and weak, she, of course, felt like she ran into a steel wall. Oh. She rubbed her nose a little as she looked up to look at him. At first, she did not know what to think as he was dressed in his Bloodborne hunter outfit and Blood Drinker was on his left side. Her eyes quickly filled with fear as he was not a cosplayer. He activated his eyes of the soul, causing them to glow their dark purple as he looked at her soul. He was looking for one thing, and he saw it. Two souls, one stronger than the other. This is the host of Drake. Girl, what is your name? She backed away a little as she answered. Itsuki Huadu. Romonus kept walking, so her backing away was not helping. I see. How old are you? She stood up and turned around to run away as her parents had told her. If you are stopped by strange people, don't wait and run away. Romonus smiled as he extended his hand and with telekinesis caused her to float back to him. While there, don't run just yet. She started to kick and flap her arms in fear as she was in the air. I'm flying?" He nodded as he started to walk with her floating by his left shoulder. In fear, she reached down and grabbed onto his shoulder. "Neat, right? Magic, I mean." She nodded, now a little curious. "Magic is real?" He nodded as his wings emerged from his back. "Hold on." Before she could process what he meant, he tensed his wings and took off into the air. Instantly, she started screaming in fear for her life as he rose high above Kuo once again. Once they were up here, she had grabbed onto his hair and head. "Don't let me fall." He smirked as he snapped his fingers and released the telekinesis. She instantly fell slack, with the only thing holding her up was the hold she had on his face. Too bad it was not enough, and she slipped. "Adho." He cackled as he flew down and caught her hand, holding her firmly as she dangled in the air. "All right, we got a lot to talk about and plenty of time. Are you ready to be honest?" She nodded with terror. "Yes, please don't drop me, Demon Man. I promised I will pray to Satan and give you a goat. Just don't drop me." He chuckled as her brown eyes were quickly welling up with tears. "Okay, Itsuki, answer my questions and I will bring you back safely. First question. Before meeting me, did you know about magic?" "No, sir. My granny would speak of Yukai and gods, though." Romonus nodded as that stayed the same. "Have you ever met an old man with a fancy glass monocle and a long beard? He always talks about perverted stuff." She thought about it before she remembered. "Oh, Grandpa OD, he sometimes would be in the street yelling about boobs and stuff. He even gave out these books about boobs in the park." "Why?" Romonus left eye began to twitch as Odin, as always, was a mega pervert. He sighed as he lifted Itsuki a little and looked her in the eyes. "Want to learn some magic then?" Itsuki, like any kid, wanted to learn magic. Sometimes she would go out into the woods to try to learn the magic of the forest. It never worked through, so she was starting to give up. "Can I learn magic?" He smiled and nodded. "Of course, anyone can learn magic." As he started to talk, he began to fly down, so he began to try to shoot his shot. She would make a good pawn, just like the original. He knew she would take several, but not nearly as many as Rias needed. He was much stronger than Rias, and his evil pieces were many times stronger than hers. "While we are here in the sky, focus on your left arm. I will help you a little. Imagine all your magic is held there." As she closed her eyes to focus, Romonus placed a hand on her hand and began to channel his demonic energy into the location of Drake's soul. Just like devils could convert mana into demonic energy, humans could in theory do the opposite. Just as he expected, on Itsuki's left arm, the boosted gear gauntlet appeared on her arm. When that happened, they had already landed on the ground. "See, you already had magic in you." When she looked at the gauntlet, she did seem excited. "Cool. Thanks, Demon Man." Romonus chuckled as he kneeled in front of her. "My name is Romonus Gremory, and I am 11. She went silent as she looked him up and down. "You're lying. You look old, and Mom said lying is bad." He rolled his eyes. "I am 11. It is just that I am being forced to grow fast." "Well, more like I am forcing my body to grow. Anyways, want to know more about that gauntlet?" Itsuki looked at it and poked it at it. "Okay, can I tell Mom and Dad?" He thought about it as he started to walk in the direction of her home. "Maybe. Tell me, how are your parents' lives?" Itsuki looked down a little as she said the truth. "Dad is always working and Mom stays home. I wish they would have more time for each other." He quickly patted her hair and messed it up. "In that case, you should know that I am rich beyond measure and I have magic. I could easily give your parents enough money so they never have to work in their lives again. I could buy them houses in Hawaii or anywhere they want. Of course, not for free." She looked up at him with innocent eyes. "What do you want then?" "I will give anything." He looked down at her with a worried look on his face. "Okay, you have no danger sense at all. I was just dangling you in the air, and now you are saying you will give anything. Pretty suspect if you ask me. Are you a spy?" She shook her head and walked in front of him. She placed the boosted gear in front of her heart. "No, I am brave. I am not scared anymore. I will give anything so that you're happy. Kids. Okay then. Let's talk to your parents, as I'm sure they will want to know about this. You are lucky I am a nice guy, because there are others in this world who will not be." She tilted her head as she walked by his side. "Why?" He looked down at her and explained it. "Because this world has two sides. The normal, mostly civilized side and my side. The side of the supernatural. Here, all that matters is power. If you do not have it, you're trash, and if you have a power others want, you are a competitor. And competition is snuffed out by the strong." Itsuki, while young, did understand what he meant. "Am I in danger?" He nodded as he pointed at the boosted gear. "More than you realize." By that point, they had arrived at her house. Itsuki walked to the door and opened it. "Mom. Dad. Someone wants to talk to you." When Romonus walked in after her, Mickey and Gora both looked shocked at the sight of him. He rapidly activated the magic taught to every devil to trick the minds of humans. He only used it a little to lower their fear and to make them more trusting of him. Gora cleared his voice once his fear was magically weakened. It was not gone, though, but he did feel a strange impulse to trust Romonus. Romonus knew how to use this magic best, as the more they talked, the more he was going to increase the effect. "Itsuki, who is this young man?" Itsuki instantly told the truth. He is a demon named Romonus. I bumped into him while running and he showed me this. Look. She raised her left hand and showed off the gauntlet. Mickey walked over and began to touch her arm all over trying to see if she could remove it. However, it could not be removed as it was her hand. What is this? She turned to gaze at Romonus, who placed a hand on his heart and bowed. I am Romonus Gremory, a noble aristocrat of the underworld of the Gremory clan. We own Kuo, something not known by the people here. A pleasure. By this point, he had already increased their trust in him to a higher degree, but still, they did not know it. Garda looked Romonus over at his hunter outfit and blood drinker at his side. You're an aristocrat? Rich? Romonus nodded as he waved a hand and pulled a chair over to sit in. The use of magic instantly caused both of Itsuki's parents to stare in astonishment. Of course, he was still in control, as instead of fear they felt admiration. Gora even said as such. Incredible. Magic is real. He nodded. Exactly, which is why I needed to talk about your daughter Itsuki. She is in danger and she is a danger to you. Well, the red gauntlet is. Romonus instantly noticed how Mickey and Garu's fear began to rise. Mickey hugged her daughter and questioned about it. How? He pointed at the boosted gear. If I am a demon, that stands to reason that angels are real, which means God is real as well. He still felt the sting, but not strong enough to stop him. Oh. God long ago, to protect humans from the creatures in the dark, created something. As part of his miracles on Earth, he gifted mankind with his sacred gears. Each one has different magical abilities, and they give their users powers. Your daughter has one such gift. Have you two read the Bible? Gora nodded. I have. My mother is a practitioner of Shinto, but I converted to Christianity. Romonus was glad that was easier. That makes my job easier. St. Longinus, when he stabbed Jesus with his spear, created a weapon of legend. The holiest object in existence, while at the same time having the power to slay gods. The true Longinus. God created another 12 to go along with it, and your daughter Itsuki just so happens to have been born with one. The fifth Longinus, the boosted gear. The prison of the heavenly dragon Drake. Gora looked at his young daughter in fear. A prison? Yes, for one of the strongest creatures to have ever walked this earth before or since. A being that at the peak of his power could have destroyed this world if he was not slayed by a great alliance of heaven, hell, and Grigori. Following his death, God sealed him away in the boosted gear, which your daughter is now the wielder. That is why I am here. The sacred gear holders never have good lives as they are drawn into my world. The supernatural, and if left alone, they will draw attention to themselves. Kuo is managed by my clan, the Great Gremory clan, and I felt the presence of a sacred gear while checking up on this, which led to me Itsuki and therefore you. Any inquiries? Mickey instantly asked the dreaded question. Can it be removed? Romonus gave her the truthful answer. Yes. She instantly perked up. Can you do it? Spare her from this side of the world. Itsuki tried to speak up as she didn't want to give up her gauntlet. She just got it. Wait, I don't W dash. Her father quieted her down. Shush now. You're too young for this. Romonus nodded. I can remove it here and now, but I will let you come up with the answer. Each sacred gear is also called equipment of the soul, meaning it is linked to the soul. If I remove it, it will cause severe soul damage, if not straight-up destruction. I can still do it if you want. Your choice. Instantly, Goro and Mickey recoiled in horror and hugged their daughter tight. They refused that instantly. Goro, as the father, spoke up. What do we do? Here's the thing. Drake, the dragon of the gauntlet, will wake up soon. Once she unlocked it, her future was set in stone. When he wakes up, she will begin to grow in power, which will draw supernatural foes toward her. I felt it because of the power I have, but once Drake is awake, hiding won't be an option. Instead, you can leave her in my mentorship. I can teach her to use her powers and how to survive in this world. In exchange, I can give you a comfortable, stress-free life wherever you choose. Your daughter will grow to be someone of legend who will stand above others. Someone who will know no pain. He once again slightly increased their positive feelings for him, but they still had the final choice slightly. Just as both of them were about to answer, Itsuki answered for them. Cool. I want to be strong. Mickey and Gora looked from their daughter to Romonus. Gora stood up and began to ask different questions. Why are you doing this? Romonus stood up as well and explained. My people, demons or devils, whichever you prefer, desire to gather the strong for our peerages, also known as our teams. I desire to mentor your daughter in hopes that she will join my team, so to speak. Of course, she can say no, and I will still teach her if you choose. Mickey and Gora looked down at their daughter's hopeful eyes. Since they were under his spell as totally normal humans, they were not as cautious as they would be otherwise. They turned to him and agreed to his request. Gora walked toward him and lowered his head. Please, just make sure she is safe. If her fate is set in stone, then at least her being able to protect herself will make us happy. Romonus placed a hand on the man's shoulder and made him look up. Of course, any father wants the best for his child. I will give you my word that your daughter shall face no harm. I will need to take her with me to get her mastery of her powers, as they can be dangerous. It should be no longer than 2 weeks. Will you believe in me? Gora nodded. I will trust you. If you wanted to harm us, you could have. Mickey hugged Itsuki tightly. Be careful and listen to him, okay? Romonus decided to calm them down. Relax, I won't be taking her with me forever. In just 2 weeks. I will even send you updates daily. I will send a servant of my clan to speak to you about your new living arrangements. Itsuki, gather your things. Consider this a 2-week vacation to the underworld. Cool. She ran off to collect some clothes as she thought of this as a field trip. In that time, he would convince her to join his peerage as a pawn. Thankfully, he knew that he would need fewer pieces than Rias did as he used higher quality pieces than her. Akino for the bishop and Itsuki a pawn. Now I just need Tobio the knight and we are golden. Then, I will need to rescue Valerie and Gasper. With them, my future raiding games will be smooth sailing until the king pieces are revealed. Tobio and Gasper will not be gender-bent.